Venezuelans have become one of the highest volume immigrant nationalities crossing the American southern border during the historic mass migration crisis, now in its third year. DHS border officers have encountered 297,500 from fiscal 2021 through now, 61,000 in the first half of fiscal year 2023. They're streaming in even still, either to turn themselves in over to Border Patrol for processing in on humanitarian permits or applying for the permit on the CBP-1 app. Almost all Venezuelans have or will be let into America on just the presumption that they can't go back to Venezuela's wrecked economy and political dictatorship, that they absolutely need humanitarian protection from terrible sufferings and political persecutions back home in Venezuela, and just can't be returned. But mass fraud appears to undergird these tens of thousands of border entries, because large numbers coming now haven't lived in Venezuela in many years. Based on Center for Immigration Studies interviews with Venezuelans over 2 years, many using the humanitarian claim are not coming directly from Venezuela. They were living happily, comfortably, and often very prosperously in other countries for years at a time. Take this Venezuelan woman who came to Juarez, Mexico, to apply for pre-approval humanitarian parole through a U.S. government app called CBP-1, and she just got her ticket punched. Under questioning, she admitted she hadn't lived in Venezuela in 7 years, but rather in Ecuador, quite happily and even prosperously as manager of a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant in Quito. See her face light up at just the mention of her years in Ecuador.
Ecuador's a nice country.
Ecuador es un país bonito.
Hermoso.
Tell me about Ecuador.
Me encantó, es un país que lo amo.
I love the country.
It's beautiful. Su gente es muy amable.
The people is really kind.
Tienen creencias muy arraigadas y defienden bastante
They
lo
have
que
a lot of
creen.
values.
Me encanta la fruta allá, es bellísima, es rica. Me encanta el encebollado. Amo el encebollado.
Everything with onions over there. It's good.
Tiene paisajes hermosísimos y los mantiene
Very
muy
beautiful
vírgenes.
sceneries. And virgin.
To be sure, like the United States throughout 2020, for all 7 years she lived there, Ecuador also has experienced bouts of unrest at particular plazas or streets or specific government buildings in downtown Quito about indigenous people's rights or environmental issues or fuel subsidies, but certainly not the whole city. So why did she leave her beloved adopted country at this particular time and claim successfully, just south of the American border, that she now needed humanitarian protection? Because, she explained, the Americans are letting Venezuelans in on CBP-1 humanitarian applications, including just recently her boyfriend, an easy economic upgrade to an even better American lifestyle.
What news from the American border did you hear that made you decide to come after 7 years?
Él me dijo
He told me
me informó de la aplicación,
about
me dijo
the
acércate
application.
a México y allí
It's like
empieza a
go
aplicar
get
con
closer
la
to the border and start using the application.
So after 7 years in Ecuador,
Después de 7 años en Ecuador,
you got this piece of information and
te
you
dieron esta
pulled the
pieza de
trigger.
información y eso fue lo que detonó el gatillo.
Lying on federal immigration forms or to federal immigration officers can be charged as serious felonies under a cocktail of different codes, like 18 U.S. Code 1001 or 18 U.S. Code 1546 and others. This woman is among an estimated 7 million Venezuelans who fled to neighboring South American countries many years ago now, when the regime of Nicolas Maduro built a kleptocracy that oversaw the ruination of Venezuela's economy years ago. According to the United Nations, the huge diaspora lives in some 17 different countries of South America and in the Caribbean. The greatest number in Colombia, where the government is not at all known for persecuting Venezuelans instead allowed them to build productive, comfortable lives working and owning businesses. Certainly, few felt any need to rush the American border during the years of President Trump. For one thing, because they well knew they'd end up deported and stuck in Mexico under his return to Mexico policy, which forced them to wait their asylum claims there. That was a policy that strongly deterred them. But the Biden government immediately started admitting Venezuelans right at the southern border in January 2021. And word about the open gates spread fast to the vast Venezuelan diaspora in all those South American countries. A great many are just like this young man last year who'd arrived in the far southern Mexican city of Tapachula after living for years in Medellin, Colombia, attending college. He only came now because he heard the Biden administration was letting Venezuelans in at the border if they claim political persecution back home in Venezuela, where he hasn't lived since childhood. Another enticement this young man mentioned was that the Biden government had just granted hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans already in the U.S. temporary protection status, TPS, ending any possibility of deportation and authorizing all of them for work permits and American welfare benefits. Highly alluring to those in South America looking for a lifestyle and economic upgrade.
And where are you hearing that you can apply for asylum?
Por las leyes que ahora está poniendo Biden, del TPS y todas esas cosas.
Because of the laws that Biden is implementing TPS.
Yes, yeah. So you're going to take advantage. You're going to take advantage. You heard about the new law.
Lo escuchaste del programa las leyes nuevas y lo vas a aprovechar para ir a
Sí.
Yeah. How did you hear about this new law?
¿Dónde escuchaste lo de la ley nueva?
En la televisión.
How long was he living in Colombia?
¿Cuánto tiempo estuviste viviendo en Colombia?
7 años
7 years.
What were you doing in
¿Qué
Colombia?
estabas haciendo en Colombia?
trabajando.
Working.
What kind of work?
¿Qué tipo de trabajo?
Soldadura.
That's,
Yo trabajo la soldadura.
with the metal.
Oh, a metal worker?
Yes.
His reasons for coming now had nothing to do with persecution or any need of the humanitarian permit for which he was fraudulently applying now in Juarez. Nothing about political persecution either. The only reasons he and dozens of other Venezuelans gave for coming had only to do with a recent Biden government acknowledgement that 99% of every applicant for CBP humanitarian entry permits got approved. Undoubtedly, he will claim persecution once he is in.
After 7 years, why did you decide to leave?
Porque ya en Colombia no nos alcanzaba
Because it
el
wasn't
dinero
enough the money in Colombia
para
to
sobrevivir.
survive.
No nos alcanzaba
It wasn't
porque
enough.
lo que ganamos lo enviamos para la familia que
Whatever
está
we
en
earn,
Venezuela.
we have to send it to our family.
Y pagar riendo, agua,
And pay
luz.
rent, water.
So, but you
electricity.
did that for 7 years.
Sí.
Why did you? Was there some news that you heard about that made you leave?
No, ya unos compañeros ya se habían venido,
Because some
trabajaban conmigo,
friends,
estaban conmigo
they
en
were
Colombia
working
y
with me and
trabajaban.
working in Colombia with me.
Y ellos pasaron,
And
tuvieron
they
la
came
oportunidad de
and they
pasar.
had the chance to go through.
If he hasn't already on his CBP-1 application. So he and thousands of other safe and working Venezuelans in Colombia came now only because the administration was letting them in, as though they were persecuted political refugees, or would suffer great harm if ever returned to adopted homelands that had taken them in years ago. This means they have lied on the front end, or plan to eventually lie to the U.S. government and under oath on government documents that they were in deep humanitarian or political trouble in Venezuela, where millions have not lived in years, or neighboring countries not known for these ills.
But so take me through your thinking. After your friends got through, you saw them get through. How did that work in your mind?
Bueno, yo vengo, todos venimos por un propósito
We
y
all
si
came
Dios nos
for
puso
a
aquí
purpose,
es por
and if
algo.
God placed
Y
us
si mis
here,
compañeros están allá
was
es
for a
por
reason.
algo. Y también nos
And
venimos por
if my friend
la
is over there,
economía, por un
there's a
mejor
reason for it.
futuro,
we
por
came
la familia.
for a better future
Se
and
están
for our
muriendo de hambre
family
en
because they're
Venezuela.
starving to death in Venezuela.
Again, Intention to work and send money home is not the same as escaping from political persecution and imminent danger. What's going on appears to be prosecutable felony fraud, each count bringing up to 5 years in prison. That it seems to be happening on a mass scale is rarely even mentioned. In fact, it seems facilitated. As Texas Monthly Magazine recently reported, the Biden administration conducts no vetting of applicants for CBP-1 humanitarian permits. Those arriving for CBP-1 appointments are given no interviews and asked no questions about vulnerabilities they listed in the app or about why they're seeking asylum in the U.S. They're simply released into the country on official parole. The magazine quotes an immigration attorney. "We're going to let in those who may or may not have any particular reason to seek asylum, including some who feel safe in their home country." Many Venezuelans head for border crossings wearing the latest fashions. They are not even suffering economically. In fact, many can afford to fly almost all the way to the southern border, very often seen rolling their regulation overhead airplane luggage up riverbanks or through Mexican towns. Going for the American lifestyle while the door is so miraculously open to them while the getting's good. A South American travel industry has arisen, posting advertisements that cater to journeys for U.S. border humanitarian permits. Many of the fraudsters display a surprising knowledge about how to abuse the Biden government setup. Take these two Venezuelans CIS first encountered in January 2023 in a Monterrey, Mexico bus station.
Now we have to run.
Planning to cross illegally, but knowing full well that at some point they'd get U.S. asylum. Both make no bones about going to earn money, not to escape terrible persecutions in Colombia.
No, it doesn't matter. What it matters is to work and help family.
Then they lay it all out. These two young men know the American system is going to grant them humanitarian parole or asylum anyway at some point, even though they clearly do not qualify.
But
porque queremos entrar y ya
we
después que
wanna
estemos
go in.
adentro con ayuda de abogados y personas que
once we're
saben
inside,
de eso,
with the help of a lawyer, we can regularize
Well,
the situation.
How do you know that?
¿Cómo saben eso?
Porque ahí
Because they
cuando un
are
abogado de inmigración, por lo menos que son
immigrant
de
lawyers.
ahora hablan de un perdón humanitario.
Both men went on to display a detailed understanding of the American system protecting those who claim political persecution. During this interview, the young man on the left began talking about credible fear interviews. That's the initial screening process for asylum claimants.
Tell me about credible fear. Where did you learn the word credible fear?
siempre supimos lo del miedo creíble.
We always knew about
Porque
credible fear.
los primeros venezolanos
The
que
first
llegaron a
Venezuelans who
cruzar
got here, who got into the States,
contaron que los tipos de preguntas que le hacían
they told everybody else the type of questions that they made over there.
era por
The
qué
border
no
patrol.
podemos estar en nuestro país, qué te hizo
Why you
salir,
can't stay in your
si tú en
country,
verdad mereces estar
what
en
makes
Estados
you
Unidos,
run from your country, all those type of questions. They know about those
si el
questions.
país te ayuda o no te ayuda,
If your country help
depende
you or not.
de lo que responde la
Depends
persona, si sí
of your response if they decide if you can stay or not.
The next day, CIS saw the pair on a freight train in Monterrey, headed for Juarez. 2 days later, one signaled that they'd made it to Juarez for their crossing. It turns out they didn't need to cross illegally after all. They sent a text to CIS announcing they'd gotten humanitarian parole and were allowed right in. Now, they were in Denver, Colorado, and celebrating success in an American nightclub under the Rocky Mountains. I'm Todd Bensman, Center for Immigration Studies.